I have never seen a ghost like that. The space shook each time worse. The crack in the walls opened and closed like a dinosaur's jaw. Out in the bay, the water receded cleanly and then suddenly arrived with a black wave. The first earthquake took place at 11:45 a.m., March 9, 2011, with magnitude 7.3 of the Richter scale. I felt a big blow in my apartment in Miyako, Iwate Prefecture, where I was living at the time. I panicked and ran down the stairs to the inn's owner, but he assured me there was nothing to worry about. When the real earthquake happens, he said, I'll know it right away. 2 days later, at 1446, the real earthquake struck, as strong as 9.0 degrees. Cracks in the buildings opened and closed like dinosaurs. At first, I still settled under my heating table and told myself that it was okay. However, the tremors became more and more terrible. A series of dizzying tremors made it difficult to stand. When the furniture started to fall, I ran out of the apartment. The house I live in is old and I'm worried it might collapse. On the stairway leading out of the building, I saw many large cracks in the walls of neighboring buildings. It sounds weird, but the cracks open and close in vibrations that remind me of a tyrant's jaw. When I got to the street, the shaking stopped, and my head was less spinning now. The quake lasted about 6 minutes, but it felt like up to 30 minutes. That could be because after the first earthquake, there were many short aftershocks happening in a row. I've never experienced anything like that before. My landlord, Mr. and Mrs. Kondo, met me and said that this is the real earthquake. I didn't even think about the possibility of a tsunami, but Mr. Kondo told us we need to go higher. We headed to a hilltop temple called Zenrinji. The temple's abbot was friends with the Kondo family. Halfway up the hill, Mrs. Kondo asked if I had a passport. I don't bring it. Panicking, I forgot all of the warnings I had been in school and flew down the hill to my apartment to get my passport. When I found my passport, I also picked up a few other items, like an empty briefcase, or an uncharged iPod, which wasn't of any use at all. The lesson I learned here is to have an emergency bag. Keep copies of documents, water filters, extra food, medicine, flashlights, boots, and blankets if possible. Disasters are like the bombings of World War II. With my passport, briefcase and iPod in hand, I rushed back up the hill to reach the temple where the Kondo and other neighbors were hiding. From the hill overlooking the bay, a strange sight caught my eye. The bay was empty, the seawater was gone. My tsunami visualization is in disaster movies. The tsunami in the movie are mostly so massive that they will destroy an entire city. The tsunami actually doesn't look sexy as Hollywood often describes it. It is true that it has wave crests, arcs and other majestic features as the painter Hokusai described in his painting The Great Wave off the coast of Kanagawa. However, those beauties are only located in the ocean. An actual tsunami, as I did, crept inland at first, then suddenly swooped down and overwhelmed everything. It does not carry the deep blue color of the sea, nor does it feature white foam. It was as muddy black because it was mixed with the things it swept through, soil, rocks, trees, houses. Until that moment, I had never seen the surrounding nature display such intense power. The water drained out of the bay but turned around and swooped over the flood walls. It covered the streets and went higher and higher. The water rose to the foot of the hill. With nowhere left to run, we stood staring at the edge of the water and prayed it wouldn't rise further. The waves really didn't rise, the hill was safe. After the immediate threat subsided, my senses returned. I can feel the chill of March in Japan, I can smell the rotting scent of the deep sea, and I can hear cries for help from below. Mr. Kondo shook me out of his trance, gave me blankets and insisted that we help those in distress. 2 firefighters managed to lift a man out of the water. He swam around his ruined house looking for his mother. We walked down the hill, careful not to slip, covering the other person with a blanket. We also helped the firefighter carry him into the temple. At dusk, snow started to fall. Across the bay, I saw fires raging in the industrial park. Mrs. Kondo found and dragged me inside the temple's fireplace room. There are about 20 people gathered there, including 3 children, 2 young couples, the rest over 65 years old and some around 90 years old. We listened to the radio for details of the situation. The elderly compare the tsunami to the bombings of World War II. Never seen anything so intense as the March 11th tsunami. In less than a day the place I called home for 18 months had turned into a pile of rubble. My world at that time was confined to a 200 square meter plot of land where Zenranji Temple was located. On the morning of March 12th, after waking up, I spent most of the morning figuring out what was going on. At that time, I didn't know the scale of the disaster, but we had no electricity and the toilet was broken. Neighbors and I were both trapped on the hill for 3 days after the earthquake. The ruins make us unable to access roads into the city. I was sent out to look for food. On the way, I came across an old man. He pointed to a chest and asked me to open it for help. I smashed it with a rock and found inside was a pile of money, perhaps his life savings. He gathered the money, thanked me and left. I finally made it to Lawson convenience store, a 45-minute drive from the temple. Yet it took me 4 hours. I waded through knee-deep muddy streets and scrambled past debris and other debris. There was no food at Lawson, but I came across some of my students. On the day of the earthquake, I was supposed to go to school in Taro Town, but got off because students were taking exams. I asked about the situation and they simply answered, "It's gone." It is difficult to describe all my experiences of the March 11th earthquake, tsunami and nuclear crisis. I have come across a lot of traumatic stories and disasters, but I always try not to get lost in them when I remember what happened. After the disaster, I was able to inform my family that I was safe. However, I was unable to speak to them early for 2 weeks because there was no electricity. During that time, people mostly cleaned up the area. I met a friend on the street and he invited me to join a cleaning team. We get up at 7 a.m. every morning, pick up a shovel and go out of the rubble. In my life, I have never seen such a devastating tsunami, and I hope I never will. However, I have never seen such strong solidarity and kindness. Hopefully that's something that I will be able to re-experience under different circumstances. In addition, Mr. Kondo's family finally bought a house on the hill. They say they don't want to live too close to the bay anymore.